Hey, Matt.
So I think, not a lot to say about the ruck. The ruck was the ruck. You did pretty
Yeah.
well. You're in the top, so you're probably pretty happy. And now we go to the maxes, the max events, the three
Yeah.
max things. So let's talk about those. The second part of
Yeah.
day one.
Yeah. So the first thing was what the girls had was this max distance overhead kettlebell bag throw, which I did absolutely horrendous in. My first, they like had us. We could do a couple practice throws, and I only did one practice throw, and it was great. And then the two that we had after that was like, it's just a technique thing, right? And so I kind of, because you're throwing it facing away from the field, so you have to go between your legs and then throw it back behind you. So if you don't release at the right time, it's either going straight down at the ground or really high up. And I did one of each of those. So wasn't the biggest like, and if that was an indicator of explosiveness, like right, like some sort of, I just felt like there was probably a better way to test that. Um, so I wasn't the biggest fan of that event, not just because I did poorly, but it just seems a little silly. But the pull-ups I thought were, it's a great mark for fitness and strength, and they did test the grip strength with the sandbag carries and the max overhead. So I enjoyed those. I thought it was a good contrast to the ruck in the morning. It was a little strange, not strange, but the ruck and each of those individual events counted, had the same weight points wise. So, you could have done all this work to bust your butt in the ruck, and it's the same points as you throwing a great toss with the kettlebell ball. And that just seemed, I think from a point standpoint, my only maybe frustration with that was like maybe it could have been a couple field events, and you do a couple of them, and then you get a score, and then your overall score from the series of field events would be your placement, like your points placement, kind of like what Spartan did with the path test, where you have 6 events, you get a score for each of those, and then that's your overall score um, as a whole. You know what I'm
What about
saying?
what about the beep test though?
What do you mean the beat test? The Spartan beat test?
The beep. Well, Dave Claxton called it like the high school gym test. Like he wasn't a fan of
Yeah.
that, so I was just
Oh, yeah. Well, but I'm just saying from a point standpoint.
right. I understand. So in terms of how you're feeling, you finished, as far as you knew, you were probably like still sticking around the top 10. How many pull-ups did you do?
I did 18 pull-ups with a
Okay.
10-pound weight.
So did you actually, that sounds like you might have like, did you win that one?
No, Maddie Jones did like 20, I think. She's big time CrossFitter and super strong. So she crushed it. That was fun to watch.
Right. I'm surprised then that you were in, let's see.
I finished day one in 8th place.
Right, but that seems surprising if you finished, I guess that's where those points, like, because if you're second and nobody tied you, right? You're the only one with that many points, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So a 6th place or a 7th place finish in the ruck and a 2nd place finish in the pull-ups, it seems like you would be higher than 8th. You know what I mean?
I think I was 8. I think I was 8 in the ruck, and then yeah, second in the pull-ups. But yeah, the toss was really bad. I think I was probably like 30 something out of 37.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was bad.
So
So
you just think if you had another couple tries at it, you could have, because I
yeah,
get that it's a different movement, but like we talked to Rachel this morning, and she wasn't sure how good she was going to do. She thought the CrossFitters would do better. And even though you're not like a quote unquote games athlete, like you're kind of a CrossFitter, like you are familiar with like sort of those sort of different kinds of explosive movements more than say the average OCR person. So you
hmm
just think, man, I just didn't get the right technique, and you might have done better if you got a couple more cracks at it.
yeah. Like I said, my very first throw, I threw it very far, and then the second one, but then you have to go back to the end of the line so for you got one throw, and then you go back to the end of the line, and then you throw again in like 10, 15 people. So it's like we didn't really get a chance to have any like repetitive practice. Like you're literally doing this for the first time. So and I'm sure I could have thrown that a lot better. It just wasn't, and like you got 2 attempts. So
right. So something you and I talked about offline, I had a big issue with the whole not giving you the scores.
yeah.
And while I'm okay with not like this and Chris messaged me as well, said like this idea of, hey, you don't know where you are, just head down, do your best. I like that for the overall, but I think for each individual, I think that is fair. So even at the end of the day, like if they didn't tell you right away what you got on the pull-ups, at the end of the day,
Mhm.
here's a leaderboard. A, so you know how you did, and B, so you could have what I talked about, the whole like, I always forget the fucking word that I'm thinking of because I'm getting old. Dispute time, or Spartan calls it a review time, whatever that thing is, right? And it's funny
Mhm.
because I said, in case they got one of them wrong, you could fix it. Like if you finished in a certain place, and like I was talking to you and
Mhm.
Riker about it, and Riker, it actually did happen to. So you didn't seem to have as much of an issue with that specific thing. So what are your thoughts on not revealing placement at all? Hope you're enjoying this chat with Corinna. Welcome to this channel. If you're new to it, we do all kinds of interviews and analysis and fun kinds of stuff about the obstacle racing world, and in this case, the hybrid fitness kind of world. We've got a lot more interviews to come on the podcast as well. I would like to take this time to give a shout out to Dave Proctor. He is the latest patron. If you want to support this channel, you can do it too. There's links below where you can become a Patreon. You get all kinds of fun access, and we really just, it's kind of a love fest, and you support this channel. Dave from the UK, thank you so much. Hope you're enjoying this interview with Corinna. Let's get back to it. Away we go.
Yeah, it is tough, but like, and there's plenty of people that like to game things and do the points totals and tallies. And for me, it's just like, yeah, there are plenty of, like, I think a lot of people said, hey, if I had known, I wouldn't have busted my butt in the ruck, knowing that was the same amount of points as some of these field events, like, because I think for some people that really like blew them up for some of the later events. And so there definitely could have been a way to game it, to potentially your advantage, but it's, to me it's like every event you want to just give your best. I mean, I don't like the gaming. It's like I feel like everyone in every event, knowing that, hey, there's only 8 that move on. You need to do your best at every single one, and you know that when you're going against everyone, that's their best. Like there's just something about that's a little bit old school that I appreciate. So to me, that was nice, for people not to be able to like tally and add points and figure out where they need to be. It's just like, just fucking go hard and do your work and make it count. And I just, that's how I roll. And I appreciate methods that, that embody that, the competition that embodies that.
I do too. I just mean from a what do you call it? Just from a transparency standpoint. That's all.
Yeah, it would have been, to that point, like it would have been nice to know for each event, like now I would love to go back and be like, where did I stack up against everyone? But I guess if you knew where you stacked up at each event, then you could do the points, and then it becomes that. But it's also like things weren't open to be disputed really. And like we crossed the finish line, they handed us a piece of paper with our placement on it, so we knew that right away. And then you have a judge, and they're counting your pull-ups right there, and they're counting out loud. And I asked, like, hey, did my last one count? And they were like, yeah, so 18. Like I knew what I had gotten. And then you look around during the farmer's carry, and you can kind of see how many people are left. And so you have an idea. Nothing's really, I don't know what Riker had to dispute, but like for the most part, they had the judges, they had the surveillance, so that there was really minimal, if any, issues on that regard in terms of what place people got.
I think the top 8 were going to be, I think it's one of those things that's like the top 8 were the top 8. That's probably who was going to be in the top 8 regardless.
Right.
So it worked. And I don't think it would have changed. Like Riker might have been in the top 8, but I don't think he would have been in the top 4. So like the end justifies the means for that point. But again, I agree with everything you say. Like, I love that just, hey, fucking show up, do your best. We're not going to tell you shit, just do your best. Like, I do like that. And with money involved, I feel like there does need to be, because there's human error, right? And Rachel told us, she's like, I felt honored at how well they were taking care of us. We each had a judge writing everything down. Like, everything was like blown away from the amount of organization, like all that stuff, which we know the military is good at. It's why it's called military precision, right? We know they're really good at that kind of stuff.
Right.
And there's human error. At the end of the night, you got 12 guys with 12 clipboards. A mistake can happen. That's all I was saying.
Sure.
So I think in Riker's case, they had he said they had me last in the ruck and not 15th, and that made my points different. And again, like, I think Riker knows he probably wouldn't have been top 4. He might have been top 8, but not top 4. But anyway, listen, it's like, because you guys reset it anyway. Like, the top 8 going to day 2 didn't matter. You reset anyway, right?
Right.
But anyway, so that's all. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. I'm saying I agree with a lot of what you're saying. That's the one change I would make in the whole event. Okay. Sure. I really thought it was put together well. And I guess before we get to day 2, I do have to ask, you and Chris and Hunter, like, what you thought the difference was with the Spartan games.
Yeah, I mean, from an organization standpoint, like, it's like you show up here, we start on time. They tell us a time, you show up, and like the cadre just carried themselves in a manner where it's like, you're not going to mess with them. And don't talk, like, like, ask smart questions and do, like, there was a level of respect that I think we all, that they gave off, and that what we wanted to give them as well, because they were very professional in their manner, like in how they conducted themselves and how they organized all of us. And so I think from the get-go, like, we just knew, like, oh, they're operating on a different standard than some of these other competitions. And, they had thought about these events well in advance. They had answers for all of our questions. They had determined that, you get 2 attempts on the obstacles, and you don't have to attempt it. Like, you just touch the first obstacle and you can run forward and pass it if that's how you want to do it. And when we asked why, because as we know, that was like what Lindsay did with the sled. And, but they made that very clear that, hey, like, you can do this and you don't have to attempt everything. And the reasoning was like, hey, some of you guys are really good at obstacles and that's your background, and some of you aren't. And so we want to make sure that, and it's a minute penalty, which is a pretty long penalty on a short course race. So I felt like that was a fair trade-off. And they're like, we want this to be doable for everyone in this competition, but we want to still, but we realize that there's different backgrounds here. So I know, I appreciated that everything was run on time. We had good judges, and they kept the standard. Like, they really did. Like, you didn't see people getting away with stuff that they shouldn't have been getting away with. So, and I like that everything that we did over the past 2 days embodied GORUCK's mission and what they stand for, and them as a company in some way, shape, or form. Like, I know we had Rogue and Savage Race, and they're not an obstacle course racing, and they're not like a strongman company, but all of those things apply to special forces, special operations, the military, like, and all the things that they're about. So I just felt like they did a good job of keeping the competition aligned with who they are as a company.
So we start day 2, right? And we heard from Rachel that they announced where you were, right?
Yeah.
So you were in 8th place. You felt good, bad?
I was in 8th place, and I felt like the top 8. Like, I kind of anticipated most of the top 8. There were a couple, like, I thought Chris and Callie would be higher up because they did so well in the the ruck and the mile event, or at least I don't know what Chris did, but Callie did, and so I was surprised when she wasn't up there. But all the points were pretty close. I felt good about it, knowing that we had the short course obstacle. They had the obstacle course next, and I felt like I would probably do well in that. So I was a little bit, I was like, yeah, I'm on the cusp there. Like, I got to do better. But I think I did well enough in the obstacle course. I think I came in third for that. So bumped me up to sixth place going into the cutoff.
So the cutoff was the next event was the
sandbag. It was like another obstacle thing, and then the sandbags. And I was like, great, I love this. Like, I did well on the O course. These monkey bars aren't an issue. The cargo net's not an issue. You put on your ruck and you're lifting sandbags, and they go from 40, 60, 80 to 120 pounds. And I just thought it would be my jam. And I was matched up with Rachel Waters, and she and I are pretty comparable in terms of just size, body type. Like, she's a strong girl. We were running together a lot in the ruck. I think she beat me by one place in the ruck. So like we were a good matchup. And like, I'm still so gutted about it, this event, just because like it was fair and square, and she just beat me. And I think I was maybe pacing myself on the sandbags a little bit too much, thinking that the 80 and the 120 would cause her to struggle a little bit. And that's where I can make up ground. And I just couldn't close the gap by then. The sandbag wasn't much easier for me than it was for her, honestly. So, it made me sad to get cut off at that event, especially because going into it, I was feeling good about it. And then the next two events were like totally looked so much fun. Oh my gosh. I think that was the hardest part. The hardest pill to swallow was then getting the rope climb workout announced, and then the grappling. And I was just like, wow, I would have loved to compete in those. And I know I would have done well in them. So I just, it guts me a little bit to still think about, but hopefully there will be a second one.
So you're saying if you just put the hammer down from the beginning on the rucks back and forth, you could have taken it. Is that what you think? Is that what you're saying?
No, I wouldn't say I could have taken it, but I just think my approach to it was too conservative. And also my legs, every time you're running with weight, your legs, from the previous day's ruck and then the mile long run with 100 pounds, like just all your legs are just screaming at you. And so when I picked up those sandbags and started running, it's like, oh shit, this hurts. Like, this is like, my legs are not moving the way I thought they would. And so, yeah, I think I really had to try to close the gap earlier than when I did, than when I was thinking I had to. So I think if I could redo it, I would probably have a different strategy. I'm not saying it would have beat Rachel. She was moving, but I do replay it in my mind and kind of have some regret.
How did you do? Because we didn't know either. Like, I just had the video of Tamara, like whatever she was shooting. So I couldn't tell how long did you last in the overhead press. Did you make it? How far down did you go?
I think I was fourth.
And then what about the max run back and forth one?
The deadlift. I think I was top 5. I want to say 5 or 6. Right. But it was hard because when you dropped, they wanted you to bring the sandbags back to the start. So sometimes when you're looking around, you're like, some girls who had already stopped were carrying bags back to the start line, so it was hard to know if they were in or out. But I think I made it pretty far in both of those.
Right. So it sounds like it was very catered to your strength. That it was definitely a good event for you.
Yeah, it was. It was. I loved every moment of it, and like I said, part of it too is like you make the top 8, and then they match up 8 versus 1. 2 versus 7. And I just got matched up with Rachel, and it's funny. Some of the pairings were like, oh, there's a clear dominant one and not, and Rachel and I were just like very even, but some of the other competitions, like, or some of the other matchups weren't. So sometimes it's a little bit of luck of like who you're going up against, and then you're knocked out, and then you don't move on.
Look at Alyssa. Alyssa had a killer weekend, right?
Yeah.
She had to feel pretty good, and then
Yeah.
she got upset on the O course, right?
I think I don't yeah, I don't know. I don't know what exactly happened with her on the O course.
Yeah, so from my understanding,
No,
it
she
was
crashed it, didn't she? Didn't she do?
no, I think she got knocked out. That's what I'm saying.
No, she not at the O course. She was in first place going into she after the short
Oh, so
course in the
she got
morning.
knocked out in the same event you did then.
Yeah, she did.
Right. And again, like a good event for her, right?
Right. But see, so for her, it's like Chris Rogowski was eighth, Alyssa was first, but in the head-to-head matchup, 1 versus 8, like those are some of your top two girls, maybe with short course speed, O course, into this type of running with sandbag. Like it's still a running event. We have to run down the field and back. So it's like that matchup was a really good matchup for that event, even though the idea of doing 1 versus 8 was that one had a big kind of lead over 8. And it was like the worst, right? The 8th versus the best. And so it's like, oh, that should be an easy race. But those matchups, because it was a very specific event, didn't really pan out like that. So, it wasn't like, oh, this is the weakest link here against the best and vice versa. Like it just ended up being good, hardy matchups for the event that was at play.